Hello, everybody. Jesse Stommel of MOOCs and Dave Cormier of Rhizo 15 here. We're going to have a conversation about the MOOCs and about, how we feel about them. So you're welcome to follow along and drop your comments in the Twitters, and we'll be following along there, and probably comments on the YouTube stream too. Hi, Jesse.
Hi. How's it going?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I think we didn't plan this, but I think we have to have an impromptu Shakespeare performance.
Oh, do we really?
Yeah. I think we have to try and see how much of the to be or not to be speech we can remember from memory.
Oh, I'm afraid that does not fall into my. There are a couple of the speeches I do have memorized from like high school, but the only one I can do is like tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow I can do, and there's a couple of others. But yeah, to be or not to be, design itself be true. I just have random bits of quotes and stuff. Look, my first question, and this is where I totally want to start off. Why did you pick such an obscure topic?
Oh, obscure.
Who is this Shakespeare guy that you're talking about?
Oh, the funny thing is that when I picked that topic, someone wondered whether or not I had picked Shakespeare for this MOOC that I was going to do at UW, just because I knew I would get a lot of students. And I thought, really? Like, I would pick the entire topic that I would teach this MOOC about just so that I would try and like pander to the widest audience possible. I think
that's what everybody's saying.
Yeah, I'm like a Hallmark card. Right? Really, like I'm trying to how many people can I draw into this course? Let's pick a topic that nobody can refuse. But no, actually, I picked it mostly because it just happens to be the thing that I have taught for the most of, for the majority of my career.
Is that true?
I do a lot of my work, all of my work and thinking and, my brain buzzing is about pedagogy. But in the classroom, teaching at universities, I've taught a lot of Shakespeare, 15 years of teaching Shakespeare almost every semester, in addition to doing other things on the side. I hadn't taught Shakespeare for about a year and a half or 2 years when I threw this out there. But it's a lot because one of my teaching mentors, my early teaching mentors, R.L. Widman, who's a co-instructor in the course, I started teaching with her my first semester of my second semester of graduate school, and I just taught with her the entire time, and she's a Shakespeare scholar, and so I kind of grew up as a teacher alongside her. So it's the kind of thing for me is that I usually teach the thing that allows me to hang out with the cool people that I like to hang out with. And, that's the reason that I'm in this hangout with you. It's mostly to hang out with you. It has nothing to do with what we're going to talk about.
You're like the coolest dude. Look, I do have a serious question about that.
Okay.
Why did you choose Shakespeare and not like Hamlet? Why Shakespeare as a whole instead of like picking one of the plays or like the tragedies or whatever?
Yeah, I think why? Partly because I figured I would do it better the second time. And so what I really wanted to do, I decided not to do the first time. And so really, this is just the best alternate plan that I could possibly imagine having. Because what I really wanted to do was Hamlet and the tragedies. I think you've got you got a little thing inside my brain. But truthfully, I mean, that's the honest truth. I decided because I didn't want to do that. To me, the climax is Hamlet and the tragedies for me. Mm-hmm. That's my favorite play. And it's the play that I enjoy teaching the most, but I didn't want to go throw a MOOC, my first Shakespeare MOOC, out into the world and start with the thing that I loved the most, partly because, of course, I'd be disappointed. That's how we always are when we teach the things we most love. Totally. But also because it's I wanted to warm up. To me, none of this teaching business is ever a beginning or an end. It's always what point in the marathon are you at that particular moment? And this was out of the gate. You don't go sprinting out of the gate. You kind of jog out of the gate. That's actually, I'm going to throw a question at you. I'm going to actually throw a variation of the same question, which is about Rhizo 14 and Rhizo 15. The first piece I've read by you about Rhizo is from 2008, about rhizomatic learning, community as curriculum. You were teaching some MOOCs in 2008. You did, you did some connected learning between 2008 and now. But why 2014 suddenly a Rhizo MOOC?
That's an interesting question. I guess that for me, I got involved in MOOCs because there was something interesting about them. There was something in 2008. George and Stephen were doing this crazy thing, and I like fighting with George. George Siemens and Stephen Downes were doing the first of the so-called MOOCs, and I like fighting with those guys. I like arguing with them. I like talking pedagogy with them. And there was something interesting about having a couple of thousand people coming out to a course and what that was going to mean. But realistically, I didn't believe that if I was going to go out and run one of these on my own, that frankly a lot of people would come, or that it was going to be something where I was going to be able to sustain it on my own, because I have the organizational skills of like a little rodent. I throw things in the corner. And I was along for the ride in some ways, and sort of still doing my rhizomatic learning thing, but not really thinking of it, because I was focused more on the classroom end of rhizomatic learning. And the relationship between what the MOOC stuff was doing and what Rhizo 14 and Rhizo 15 have done really took kind of a while to evolve in my head. Because then I started going, well, because the stuff that George and Stephen started doing had, we're doing connectivism, and these are the 2 papers we're reading this week, and these are the 2 papers we're reading this week, and this is what we're going to do this week, and we're going to talk about it in this way. And they were very much experts who were having a conversation on a topic. And even if you look at the most recent DAL MOOC that George Siemens did at the University of Texas at Arlington, he had 5 or 6 really, really strong experts in learning analytics come in and run weeks where they were talking about content. And at some point, it occurred to me that it would be hilarious to try to run a course with absolutely no content in it. And just because it's one thing for me to do it in my classroom, right? I walk in. I mean, I think that in a lot of ways, rhizomatic learning works better in a classroom, because I can hold people together. I can emotionally sustain them through the transition process from I'm here to deliver you things that other people used to believe to we're all just kind of hanging out, because a week from now or 3 weeks from now, this approach is going to make this class hop and vibrate, and you're going to learn way more at the end of this process if we go this way, but the first couple of weeks are super painful. So finally, I guess I just got the courage to take the leap and try this sort of approach where, and if you look at, I'm answering this question too long, but if you look before Rhizo 14, there are a series of 3 blog posts. The first one is in 3 days, period. The first one's like, well, we'll structure it this way. There'll be more structure at the beginning, and I'll let go more and more and more. And the second one's like, maybe a little less structured than that. And the third one is like, no, you know what? The hell with it. We're going to go the whole way. We're going to go with this with no content at all, and we're going to take a shot at it. So I think it took me a long time to get there. It took a long time for the thinking to mature. It took a long time for me to come to terms with the concept of doing it, and frankly, to have the courage to do it, I think.
Yeah. I think that's the bit that takes so long, because the truth is that you're essentially the kind of MOOC that you ran. You don't necessarily have to spend months and months and months building it, but instead you have to spend years and years and years building up the confidence to say, hey, I'll run this thing and see what happens, and not be terrified about it.
Yeah. And I mean, the first couple of weeks of that first one were terrifying, frankly, and things just went crazy on me, right? Like, we had a big problem in week 2 of Rhizo 14 that still echoes now. I mean, there's a bit of it that it just echoed through hybrid pedagogy this week. And that's exciting in a sense that, there's innovation happening there. There's innovation. There's people thinking, there are people moving there. And I think I'm infected by the language. So that's really cool. But at the same time, yeah, it took a lot of going, what would that look like? So you end up on Coursera. How did this happen? How did you end up doing a Coursera MOOC?
I think someone made a deal with the devil, and I had to pay the price.
Oh, okay.
All that had to be paid, and I guess I was promised my firstborn Shakespeare MOOC would be given to Coursera. How does that happen? Well, it's not as though UW is not in any kind of exclusive agreement with Coursera. However, UW-Madison had launched a round of MOOCs on Coursera. They had done 3 or 4 MOOCs on the Coursera platform, and they were ramping up to do another round of MOOCs. And I wanted to be a part of the conversation that UW-Madison was having about MOOCs. And initially I thought, no, I'm going to wait. I talked with various different people and thought when they open up and are willing to experiment with platforms, because the things I love to do is I love to kind of DIY platforms. I mean, that's sort of what Rhizo is. You sort of you don't start with the platform and then see what you're going to put in it. You instead start in the middle of a field, and then as the thing matures, it starts to invent its own platform. That's the fun for me. So starting inside of something, I've got a dog running laps.
There was a cat went by earlier too. That's all good. No, that's all good.
Emily, come here. Come here. I think that you definitely want to be introduced.
Oh, hi there.
To everybody.
Wow,
this is
that's a great
Emily
dog.
who's running laps around my house at the moment. Go on. Okay. What was that question again?
You're doing great.
So the thing is that I essentially just decided, I don't have any kind of, I'm not going to turn up my nose at the opportunity to play around on this. I'm going to have animals now coming at me from all sides during this thing. I've got many in this house. So essentially, I'm not one to turn up my nose, and I will not ever put my work on Coursera. It was a matter of really thinking, is there a question I can ask? And is there some kind of way that I can get an answer by diving into this experiment? Is there something I can learn from it? Is there something I can get out of it? And for me, it was about really just seeing what I could do on that platform. I'd seen a lot done, and I thought, essentially, I had a similar goal to you. I thought, can I do a MOOC without content on the Coursera platform, which is all like perfectly tuned for content delivery? And essentially that was my goal. How can I make a MOOC without content on a platform that is essentially masterful at controlling and manipulating and disseminating content? And that seemed like a fun, fun experiment. The thing for me is that I had to develop. The weird thing is that in creating a MOOC on Coursera with no content, I had to develop more content than I've ever developed for any course before. So that was kind of the irony, but also probably less content than any MOOC that's ever been on the Coursera platform. But that's what I sort of figured. I figured it's that thing you're describing. You have to, in a sense, meet people where they are to a certain extent and lead them into the space. Like it's in a sense, here, I'm going to give you a little content that's going to put you at ease so that you'll take my hand, and then I'll lead you into this different, very different space from your average Coursera MOOC.
Yeah, one of the things that you said there really sort of resonated with me, and that's that one of the other points that really made the difference for me is when I started committing more to my own research. So the thing that I said at the start of Rhizo 14 was that I'm doing this for me because I have these things I want to know about and these things that I think are interesting, and I want to try them. And it says, I say this all the time, but I actually do mean it. I am playing, and I'm inviting you all to come play with me, but I'm kind of carrying the ball. So it's collaborative in that sense where, I don't care what people are talking about, whatever else, but I have this thing that I've been thinking about for a really long time, which is about how you set an ecosystem and how you potentially allow community to develop, and how you can participate in how much you should participate and where interventions make sense and all this stuff, where you allow complexity to be in the forefront rather than what we normally do in education, which is try to shove it to the back. But that's where the start for me was like, okay, well, if I totally commit to doing this in the way that I want to do it, and that's the other thing, actually, to be fair, that was the difference for me with Rhizo 14, is that it's the first time I've done it on my own, where I just went, you know what, I'm not even talking to anybody. I mean, obviously I talked to Bonnie about it, but that's par for the course. And I talked to people about it, but at the end of the day, it was like, okay, I'm going to try this out and see how it works. Yeah. And it's been really rewarding. It's worked out really well. I think you were really happy with the way your course went from what I saw anyway.
Yeah, I'm super happy with it. I mean, I think it did in my brain as well as it could have done given the circumstances. On the other hand, I encountered a lot of things that I wasn't anticipating. A lot of different kinds of interactions happened in this course. The course showed up in different places that I wouldn't have expected. I'm a person, I use Twitter extensively, and that's, every MOOC that I've taught up to this point, every online learning experiment I've done at this point, Twitter has been at the center of it. This one, Twitter just kind of crashed and burned. I mean, not completely. There was a lot of interesting interaction on Twitter, but by comparison, very little to what happened on Facebook. And I'm not a Facebooker. And we made a Facebook group, and Sarah Marty, who is one of the co-teachers, she knows and understands Facebook. And so I wasn't going to create a Facebook group because I thought I can't really make that go. I don't know how to make it go. Yep. She said, hey, I want to make a Facebook group. We made a Facebook group. That, in a way, was the most lively part of this course. Wow. So I think that kind of, to me, the collaborations is what makes that happen. I love what you said, though, about kind of doing it on your own, because I don't do anything on my own. I think if I wasn't working with collaborators, I don't think I would get anything done. This one had 4 primary teachers. Every other MOOC that I've done has had at least Sean Michael Morris, if not more people involved in it.
And I want to be clear. There's an awful lot of people who anchor these MOOCs. So Sarah Honeychurch and Mahabali for sure were people who in both MOOCs, actually, I approached them as moderators in the first MOOC on the first day. Or actually, no, it was a week before the MOOC started. I started approaching people to be extra participants, I don't know what you'd call it, and say, hey, look, why don't you take care of that while you're at it? So the Facebook thing very much worked out that way. Very similar, because while I do use Facebook, I mostly use it to post pictures of my kids, which is not the same thing as teaching with it. So I had a number of people who sort of watched that. Dog Tracks. What's Dog Tracks' real name? I always forget.
Oh my gosh, I call him Dog Tracks too.
What's that, Bonnie? Kevin, of course. Kevin Hudson.
Yes.
Yeah. Sorry, Kevin.
We love you, Kevin.
Kevin anchors the Google group, and there's a bunch of people who do far more in the course than I do. So when we do the social network analysis, it's really funny. Every time it comes out, there's a guy in Turkey called Aras who sends out social network analysis information every week. And there's a big rush to see who's actually at the top of the list, and it's usually not me. Right? I think that's really awesome. So when I say I did it on my own, I mean the conception of it, like I'm totally secretive. I won't tell anybody. I won't even tell Bonnie what the week title is going to be before I post it. So I sort of sit down and tear up myself for the whole week, following along with the conversations, trying to figure out what's going on, and then really 5 minutes before I post it, I finally decide what the topic for the next week is going to be. And that's an intensely private process, but that's what my face-to-face teaching is like. I'm extraordinarily collaborative with the learning process, but the machinations, I'll talk about it, but I think that surprise, it must just be my thing. Like, it drives me forward. Like, I love the element of surprise. I love to go, surprise! And, I got a bit last year, they said that, you're more jester than teacher. And I think that role really appeals to me. So it's in that sense that I think the soloness is more the soloness of the jester than it is of the tyrant.
Well, I think there's something interesting about that, and I want to kind of push on that a little bit more for both of us, because one thing that I've always thought with my teaching is I've always talked about peer-driven learning. I've always collaboratively taught, but there's a way in which there's almost an irony that in order to get people to take agency and ownership of their own learning, you actually have to assert a certain amount, or you have to provoke. And that's something I've been thinking about a lot, about that sort of idea of provocation. And also something that I encountered in this MOOC is that people wanted, essentially, they wanted more expertise from me. They wanted me to draw circles around things for them, and I didn't very pointedly. But even that is a sort of act of agency on my point, because I'm withholding then.
Because you have that expertise. Yeah, you could deliver it if you wished to.
And it's not like I asked a question that I already knew the answer to. It's in fact that I knew there wasn't really an answer.
Right.
And so I wasn't going to tell them what I knew, because they would take that as an answer rather than realizing that there were 6 possible answers. The teacher tells you one answer, that's the answer. If you try and come up with it, you might actually come up with 6. And then it's my chance to say, ooh, but there's a 7, and all those 6 are good. So that's what I want to ask us both, which is this sense of how do we balance that?
Uh-oh. Don't do that. I'm going to assume that the only thing I can do is assume that Jesse has dropped out for a second here. And that I'm still here, because if I'm not still here, then we're not still broadcasting. Hello, Jesse.
I cut out. I think I'm back now.
Excellent. I'm glad to hear it.
What did I say last?
It was really brilliant. It was something about MOOCs.
I think the last thing I said was I said the word provocation. You said the word machination. And those 2 words both seem interesting. They're both very assertive words.
Yeah, I think so. And it's funny, one of the topics from ISO 14 was enforced independence. And I think there is a really... I've taken up this obsession with the idea of cognitive dissonance as being critical to education. And I know it's this fanciful idea. Somebody has probably written far more deeply about it than I've been thinking about it, but it's been stuck in my head. And that's that at some level, we always end up in these points of conflict where we have oppositional ideas that struggle for dominance. And what K-12 education particularly, but what a lot of educational theory tries to do is sort out the dissonance and try to clear it up. And I think that tension about having students feel like they're in control of their learning, and yet you're obviously in control of their grading or the discussion or the topic or the direction, that tension, how can you possibly bring people to the point of coming up with those 6 and then you having the 7th sort of ideas? It's totally normal and human for us to all feel that way. And I guess that's what I've come down to, is that as long as we act normally, those things happen. So if I act about the course the same way that I would act with my staff at work, so I'd say, well, what do you guys think? I don't know. Well, there's not an answer. You know, I had a conversation with student union at my university today, and we're talking about student engagement possibilities for whatever. And they were coming in and they're trying to solve it. I was like, guys, there's no answer. There's no solution. The word engagement doesn't mean anything. We all know that we're heading in a direction towards students having a better time, but quality doesn't have a response. It's a goal that we're headed towards, and that's the normal way most things work, right? Whether it's friendship or empathy or all those things that I think are important about being human, they're all kind of like that. And I think that if you can somehow try to take that approach to Shakespeare or whatever, and let it, because I mean Shakespeare was doing that, right? It's kind of fun because that's what he was trying to get at. That's what makes him relevant, is that he wasn't telling you how to feel. He was giving you sort of conflicted situations where there is some complexity, where you're not really sure who to root for. Can you really like Cordelia? Isn't she just a little too nice? Yeah, so that's kind of where I end up. I know that's kind of a muddle, but that's kind of how I feel about it. It's a big muddle.
Yeah, well, one of the things that I was thinking about as you were saying that is, and that suddenly came up also when you brought Shakespeare into the picture. One of the things that I do, you were talking about...
You brought Shakespeare into the picture.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
That wasn't me. That's totally you.
Said something about Shakespeare and Cordelia, and like, who's Cordelia? So Shakespeare is very meta. he's constantly referencing himself. He's constantly reminding you that there are actors on a stage. He's constantly reminding you that there's a world outside that stage. He's constantly reminding you that there's distinctions between those worlds, but also that they overlap and that they bleed into one another in cool ways.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I often, you talked about sort of keeping your machinations hidden until you release them in a sort of surprise.
Yeah.
One of the things that I'm almost addicted to, and I don't know if this is different or if it's a variation of the same thing, I actually am very meta. So I constantly am speaking aloud. I can't ever start anything way in advance because I have to actually be doing the thing as I'm doing. So I start a journal, and the journal really just is me writing for me and Pete Roraba writing for the first 4 months of it. And because we wanted to essentially just have our entire process out in the open. Here we are starting a journal. Hey, look at us. What do you think? What should we write about? What are you all interested in? How should we do our peer review process? And so I think in the same way, that's kind of how I've seen Rhizo emerge. And that's also how I've approached my MOOCs. With this Shakespeare MOOC, I didn't feel as though I could do that in quite the same way, because there was a sense in which I wanted to prepare something in advance. So I essentially built the entire course, very different from any of the recent iterations of MOOC, which I built 1 week, and then we had the week, and then we built the next week. We had a rough plan. The first MOOC was only 1 week long, so we built most of that in advance.
I was going to say that was, yeah.
Yeah, we weren't going to try and build that ship after it was on the water. But this one, I spent 9 months building a 4-week MOOC, and then set it into the world and watched what became of it. But there was a way in which I almost, once it was set in motion, at that point, it wasn't me driving the ship anymore. I built a ship, and then I put it on the water and said, I'm going to hang out with you on this ship. But then it essentially got taken in all of the various different directions that it got taken. And I actually was by far not the biggest participant in the conversations. I messaged, I think, about 70 times or something on the Coursera discussion forum. And I think the biggest participant messaged 300 times.
That's
so
great.
3.5, 4 times more participation by someone else than me. And I actually kind of enjoyed that. And I was really most of the time trying to figure out what's the optimal amount of my presence and what's the optimal amount of my absence.
Totally.
And that's hard for me because I have to hold myself back from participating because I want to be there. I want to play.
That's what I wanted to follow up with, which is, for me, the hardest part is not talking. So when I see something, and I mean, there's some really brilliant people. I was really fortunate with the group that I got with Rhizo, both Rhizos. I've got a lot of really brilliant people. Not that you should be listening to that, but a lot of really smart people. And, I think of somebody like Keith Hammond. I don't know if you're familiar with Keith's work, but he writes so much better about rhizomatic learning than I ever will. That that stuff is great, but in the bandying of the discussion, I find that it's always hard, particularly in the crafting of the questions, for me to not drop my opinion into the middle of a question. So I will write a week and then look at it and go, yeah, that's an opinion. Yeah, that's an opinion. Yeah, you have to take that out. Yeah, no, that's very clever, but no, you can't have that either. Did you find in the design process that you were pulling because I found I was pulling myself out as much as I could.
So just a little technical thing. Someone told me that they're not seeing your face. Do you have me clicked?
I have mostly you clicked. Yeah, I keep forgetting to click myself.
Okay, just checking. But the answer to that is yes. But I just decided really early on that I was going to do, the gist for me is that the key decision-making point for me was most of these MOOCs have video lectures. I don't want to have traditional video lectures. What am I going to do instead?
Right.
I'm not going to do nothing, because if I have no video lectures at all, the Coursera, I will be hunted by the Coursera students who have, you know, they're coming
an
for a
expectation.
particular thing. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. The movie has previews before it, and then you watch the movies, and it's about 2.5 hours long, and you got a
Yeah.
seat, and it, you know, it's got a coaster where you can put your drink. And sure, you can do something very different
Yeah.
up on that screen, but you can't.
Godard did jump cuts, but he didn't not have a movie.
Exactly, exactly. You can't just completely change it. So I thought, well, what do I want to do? And I thought, well, I have some experience as a documentary filmmaker. So I just thought, well, I'll just approach these videos. Now I've got other animals.
How many animals are there? Hello there. Aren't you cute?
So I thought I'll approach this as though it were a documentary film instead of a video lecture. And essentially that means I'm not in it. I filmed the documentary, but the interesting thing about that is that I left myself mostly out of it. I did put myself in most of the videos, but only I limited myself to 20 seconds out of the 15-minute video.
Okay.
So I'm in all of them. So it's like, there he is again, but then mostly gone.
A little Hitchcock
I didn't
action.
want my absence to be a thing.
Just you walking onto the bus, right at the start of the rope.
But yeah, and partly that was because I don't want the mysteriousness of absence
to
be a kind of presence. So I'll just be there, but be there a tiny bit. The interesting thing is that because I was working on editing these so meticulously, it took 30, 40 hours of footage down to about 2 hours of footage that we finally have for all of the videos. It means that I'm actually there. It's just people can't see me. I'm there in an editing bay, not in the clips.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you've seen the videos that I did for Rise of 14, but they, in some cases, actually literally took 1 minute and 45 seconds to record, because I would turn it on, talk for 1 minute and 45 seconds, turn it off, and then post it. So a different approach to video in that sense. I think I'm a big fan of the disposable learning object. So for me, I remember back in the day, back in the day, we used to put a lot of effort in 2002, 2003 into internet video, because it was it was so hard to get it up and whatever else. And then I realized very quickly that for the stuff I was doing for Shakespeare, he's only writing so much new stuff now, so I don't think it's as big an issue. I think your stuff probably has a more shelf life, whereas the stuff that I do tends to fade away pretty quickly. I mostly because I get bored. So yeah, no, I think that's a big difference.
Although interestingly, the cream rises to the crop. I mean, the cream rises to the top. I was going to say the cream rises to the crop.
There's a lot of weird ways that sentence was going.
No. So the cream rises to the top, whatever that means. And so there's a way in which I think that some of your stuff does end up recirculating. Do you ever worry that one video that you produced on that Saturday morning when you hadn't showered and you just did it, and it was 1 minute and 20 seconds. Are you ever worried that that's going to be the video that 300,000 people have watched on YouTube 10 years from now? Man,
the only one that has 300,000 views on it is the What is a MOOC one, and fortunately that doesn't have my face in it in that way. Yeah, you have very little control over the things that people actually decide. Fortunately, I'm sub hype, so the stuff I've done is never gone. I've talked to people who have been in that situation where they did something and it went all crazy on them, and they're like, "That's not the thing." It's funny. I ran into what's his digital natives face? Mark Prensky.
Yeah.
At BET in January this year, and I was asking him about it. He's like, "Yeah, it's pretty hard to move on." Because it's an article he wrote. It's not a particularly good article. And frankly, I think he probably knows it's not a particularly good article, but it's really hard to change. That's the thing that worries me, is that if I care about the sort of Nietzschean yell about what you believe today, and yell about what you believe tomorrow, and that's kind of the way that I look at it. What I'm thinking now is what I deliver, and tomorrow I'm probably going to think something different. That's the thing that worries me, is that somehow I won't be able to do the next iteration because everybody's going to be stuck in the last one. That's always the concern.
Yeah. So did you ever give any thought to not doing any MOOCs again ever, because you're like, what is a MOOC? It's already got 300,000
Uh,
views. I don't want to keep massaging that engine. Like, did you ever think that's not the engine I want to
well, I never
massage?
called Rhizo 14 or Rhizo 15 MOOCs. To me, when I did Rhizo, if you look at all the stuff leading into Rhizo 14, I just called it an open course. I mean, frankly, I had no idea. I did not think that I've only had, that was 500 or 600 people come out to these. And I don't know if that's a MOOC anymore by the way people see it. I was at eMOOCs in Europe, in Belgium last week, and I asked that to the crowd, and they're like, And then, I was comparing it to another MOOC where there were 12,000 registrants, and the participants in Rhizo 15 had 4 times as many tweets. So I've got 400 or 500 participants, and I've got 5 times as many tweets as the 12,000. So is it massive? To me, it is. Like, I think we're going to end up with 25,000 tweets out of Rhizo 15. That's a lot of stuff. But I'm not particularly attached to the word MOOC in that sense. Although there's a part of me that's just pig-headedly stubborn about it, and I keep it up because every once in a while I get to sidle up to somebody who, like the guy at the conference who said, "Oh yeah, there's a race car driver who learned how to race car drive on a MOOC. He was doing virtual reality racing," and I was like, "You people, you don't." I just can't. So it gives me an opportunity to sort of get involved in that conversation occasionally, but I'm not attached to it. I think that there is a huge potential in the internet being what it is. Like, I think that every time I'm still like a kid in a candy store, right? It's really cool that we can get all these people from all over the gosh darn place who can get together and learn together with no anything, because everything we need is available, and you just pull it in, and you can just there's one of the participants of Rhizo 15 goes, "Man, I can't wait to get back on my time zone because you guys are killing me," because she's in Australia and she's getting up earlier than usual and in the middle of the night and checking her phone because she's involved in some discussion about something, and that's amazing. Like, and I'm not done being giddy about how cool that is. I guess is where I'm at.
Yeah, and I'm not done. I write critical things about MOOCs. I write positive things about MOOCs. I'm really good at loving something to death and also hating it to death. I'm really not good at that middle area. And usually a thing like a MOOC, I both love it and hate it to death. But the thing that I will say on it, like if I'm waxing poetic, the thing I'll say is that when I taught the first MOOC in 2012, I had been a sort of lurker in some MOOCs prior to that. I had taught online fully online since 2007. I'd taught hybrid classes, open courses, small format open courses since 2002. I actually hated the internet in a lot of ways. And I kept doing it. Because I wanted to figure it out. I wanted to see what this thing was. And I also did it because there were people on there that I loved, and I wanted to play with them. But I kind of hated online learning. And I would go and set up the course and then not enjoy it myself at all. And I felt like I was doing a good thing. But when I taught that MOOC in 2012, it was the first time that I just unequivocally thought, oh my God, I love online learning. And it was because there was something about, and I'd done Twitter networking stuff and I'd always enjoyed that, but there was something about kind of the mashup between the kind of network experience I was having on Twitter and the notion of a course and the notion of this constraint of this little party in this limited amount of time, smash those together, put it in a short space of time, and then put so many people in there that you can't see straight. And I suddenly was like, holy shit, this is it. Yeah. This is what online learning is. It's actually like, what if a giant cocktail party with 3,000 people and the internet had a baby? Like, that was online learning. And I finally thought, oh, I can never go back. And so now the thing is, like, I have not used, like, for my small format online classes, I now just have them out on the open web. I'm just going to make these MOOCs that I don't market. Like, essentially, it's just a MOOC that I don't tell anyone about.
Yeah, no, I think that so much of that resonates with me because it's the mashup and the possibility, all that stuff. And I use the cocktail party metaphor a lot actually because I'm not saying that it's going to be a fun cocktail party for everybody, and it's you may not like the language, and there's potty mouths at the party, and all that stuff comes into play. And I think that that's where I wanted to go with the next question I had for you, because this is a big issue for me, is did you have to do any interventions inside of the course when you're, because that's actually, it's come to I've started to believe that intervention, social intervention, not content intervention, because content, social intervention is by far the biggest role for me inside of one of these sort of community activities.
Yeah. Well, and also I think the hardest role, like emotionally the hardest part in a lot of ways. It's not something I'm really built for. I'm built for love and hugs and snuggles. I'm not necessarily built to be a gatekeeper, and that notion of like clicking the button that makes someone's post disappear forever,
Right.
like that action for me is difficult every single time.
Wow.
Every time I've blocked someone on Twitter, I've had an existential crisis about it. I just am not good at it. I read these things that people say, here's why blocking will make your life better. And I just think, that'd be great if I could do it. Like the act of blocking, though, is just so difficult. And I often then unblock people and change.
And then you remember why you blocked them in the first place. And we've lost Jesse again. He's really super entertaining while he was here. It's funny, that blocking issue is one that doesn't bother me so much. It used to think that I should be able to... we lost him entirely. We're just going to assume that Jesse's going to come back. We got about 16 or 17 minutes left of conversation, folks. If anybody has any questions, feel free to post them to Rhizosphere in the Twitters, and then we'll be able to pick those up. That's RHIZOSPEARE. And yeah, if you guys have any sort of thoughts or whatever else you'd like to share, I'm more than happy to dig in there. Hi, Jesse.
Hi, I'm back.
That's okay.
I feel just like I get excited and then I shut down the Google.
Too much enthusiasm. Too much enthusiasm.
So going back to your question, yeah, it's the hardest part. And so yes, there was a certain amount, and I did delete some posts, and I did have to send some private messages to people and say, I'm not really feeling comfortable with this. I did have to have some moments where I considered whether I was going to ban someone from the course. And all of that is really difficult. But I think you're right. I think that you have to have, I think those kind of spaces require someone who's willing to jump in.
Yep.
And it's often not even for the benefit of shutting down the person that needs to be shut down. It's for the other people to see you do that, so that they then realize, oh, I see, this is a safe space.
Yeah.
When that kind of thing happens, it's not going to be tolerated. And what's interesting is that usually in an ideal world, what I like to see is everyone else in the course realizing, oh, I can assert and make sure this place stays that way too.
And then that'll police itself. So for me, I missed one of these things in Rhizo 14, and there's a paper out there. It's called Rhizomatic Learning: Darkness and Light. It's by Jenny Magnus and Francis Bell. For anybody who's interested, you can go and read. What happened? There was a dividing line that happened in the second week, where there was an argument between a theory and practice. And the rhizomatic learning is based on the work of two French postmodernists who are, I won't say they're the most difficult people to read, but it's way out there. Like it's pretty close. It's pretty close. It's pretty bad, right? And to me, that's the advantage, because it provides this sort of rich tapestry to work upon. For a lot of people, it's really frustrating, particularly if you don't have any background in philosophy. It can be really troubling. And the course doesn't talk about any of this stuff, right? And I have no interest in trying to get people to read Deleuze and Guattari. But anyway, so in the second week, while I was sleeping, this huge divide happened in the middle of my course. And I looked at it and I went, oh, they'll sort that out. And I went to work and I didn't really see it till lunchtime. And by lunchtime, it was done. The fork had happened, and the lines had been drawn. And it never really came back together. Whereas this time, I was much more on top of things. And that's the thing. When there's no content, the only content is really the people in the course. And those people are people with feelings and all the wonderful things that come with being people. And this time, I did I didn't have to delete any posts this time. But what I did do was both hey, you may want to pull back a bit there, but also where I sent messages to people and said, you know that person who just sent you that message? Let me tell you what she means by that. And sort of maybe getting in the way of some of those conversations and saying, look, that person is doing that in this way, and there's a cultural difference or maybe whatever, sort of just having done online communities for 10 or 15 years or however long I've been doing it, where you look at it and you're like, you know what, that's the kind of thing that could make someone feel like they're being made fun of. And they're not, and I don't think they are, but I'm going to send a note to that person and just see how things work out.
Yeah.
So I did a lot more of that this year. And it's hard to know, but we didn't have at least any public issues that I saw. There may be other things that happened. That's the thing. Anything could have happened.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing. That's the next place that I was going to ask is essentially how, at a certain point, when a course gets large enough, you can't possibly see everything that happens in it. There were something like 60 pages of threads in the Shakespeare MOOC. 60 each page has like at least, I don't know, there's hundreds and hundreds of threads with hundreds of posts inside of them. How could I ever read all of them?
We can't.
Can't expect myself to. And also I can't expect my co-teachers and I all together to even read them all. Plus, the thing is, the course was happening on, with 20,000 students, it essentially had a thriving community on Facebook, a thriving community on Twitter, and a thriving community in the course itself. And I was trying to be in all three and could hardly be in any at all. And so how do you let go and realize I might be able to be there at the key moment, but I might not actually be able to be there. And how do I essentially, it's a weird balance of both taking responsibility and realizing that there's also things you can't take responsibility for. But you have to do both, because you can't just say, oh, well, it's not my fault because I didn't see it. You made the course. You're responsible, in a sense, for everything that happens inside of it.
Well, and this is something that I people come across me about occasionally, which is, you started this thing, this is your thing, so, and I mean, I understand people's perspective on that. I can't control the internet, and I can't. I can make ethics are about about the way that you develop a context, and they're also about effort. And so the way that I look at it is that I make the best effort I can to set a social contract, both in everything that I do, and in the way that I talk about things, to set a context that hopefully is a productive one. And then every effort I make inside of it is about the sort of trying to make that experience a healthy one for the people who are involved in it. But once you bring in the complexity of the internet, you can't guarantee those things. And frankly, you can't guarantee them in a classroom anyway. Like in a face-to-face classroom, it's a false comparison. If you have 500 people in your classroom, there's no way you're guaranteeing anything for those people in there in a face-to-face classroom.
But even if you have 20, even if you have 10, that's right, you can't necessarily guarantee. You can't know everything that happens in their life. No. You can't know what they feel when they read paragraph 16 of book X. Like, you can't know what thing is going to make them cry. What thing is going to, it's one of the things that, like, what thing is going to trigger them? It's like there's almost that fault, like, suddenly I'm thinking about trigger warnings and thinking about the way in which we start to put these trigger warnings, but there's a way in which we can't actually know what things are going to trigger people.
Mm-hmm.
And we can't know what things are a potential source of anxiety or pleasure, for that matter. For even 10 people, how would we do it for 20? How would we do it for 60? How would we do it for 500 or 20,000? One of the things that I talked with one of my co-teachers with in this MOOC is this sense in which with 20,000 students, if you've been teaching face-to-face classes, 35 people per class, even if you've been doing it for 20 years, even if you've been doing it for 40 years, you might not have actually hit 20,000 students yet. And so all of a sudden, in one 4-week period, you're going to have more students than you've ever taught before. It essentially means all the outliers that you may not have even seen are going to be there. The best student, the student who has the best experience, the student who has the worst experience. They're all going to be there, and you're probably going to see what they say about you and say about the course. And it's the sense in which you have to kind of keep your eye on, keep your eye on the middle to a certain extent, paying attention to the fact that there's an outlier. But you're always going to have that, especially a course like yours. There's people who are going to hate that course so much that they're going to say, this is the worst thing. You're disrespecting your institution by even teaching this thing, Dave. Like, how could you do this? How could you, like, it's going to go there, and it's going to go to the other end, which I think is just as problematic. It's going to go to idolatry, where it's like, you are the God of all learning, Dave. Like, I want everything that I ever do to be influenced by this amazing, wonderful thing that you gave birth to. And the thing is, both of those aren't really real.
Well, the second one is.
Well, it's real for me.
Yeah, it's funny because that's the reason why this course has nothing to do with my institution. So there's no connection between either of the Rhisos and the university. I never spoke to them about it. It's not included in anything. Rhizomatic learning is not taught at my university, and that provides some protection from that. And it also gives me the freedom that I don't have to. There's no, not that I don't have a good relationship. They probably let me do it, but it allows that I don't need to do the negotiation. But yeah, that extreme ends of people's responses stuff is. Week 4 was a bit weird in Rhizo. A colleague of mine from New Delhi decided he was going to preempt my topic, and he started a blog post, and he said, well, Dave's probably getting tired, he's doing all kinds of work, and it's supposed to be a community curriculum, why don't I set the topic for week 4? And week 4, the topic that he suggested was, shouldn't we be able to do this course without Dave? And it's an interesting question. We were supposed to be doing practical learning, practical rhizomatic learning. So the topics ended up being, at least from my perspective, practical. So we talked about, the place of objectives, the place of content, the place of the instructor made total sense. Unfortunately, and uncomfortably for me, it ended up being a lot of people defending my which is not what I was hoping for from that conversation. I didn't know how to respond. Oh wow, no, Dave's really, and it's like, yeah, Dave's really important to the process. I didn't quite know. I mean, I appreciate it, and I appreciate the, people's support in that sense, but it was a bit difficult because you're so much apart. When you take the content out, for some people, you become the content. Even as much as I've withdrawn from the process, and I planned for obsolescence, and it was great. Actually, the most rewarding part of this whole course for me, and in a sense, the most painful. This is a weird sort of, again, more cognitive dissonance. I read the last week. I asked for people to write artifacts. So if you're going to leave a memory of yourself for other people, if we're going to put them all together, what would you say? And I read like 5 in a row that had no mention of me in them whatsoever. And I was like, that thing. And then a little bit of me was like, And then I was like, no, 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 no. But this is what I want. Like, this is the goal. And it's hard to fully negotiate your way out of the process because, while 99% of me says no, idolatry is terrible.
I'm neat. Oh my gosh, people think I'm neat. Like,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's right.
well, and the truth is that there is a way in which I have spent a lot of my career having digital pedagogy, having online learning, having even just my research in student agency pedagogy, not really being at the top of the pile, so to speak. So suddenly, like, having someone say, no, the work you do matters, like, you can't help but say, oh, it does.
Jake.
Thank you. Like, it matters.
Yeah, I mean, and again, we're allowed to be human in this process too, right?
Yeah.
And I think that every once in a while, there's a little voice in my head that kind of goes, okay, yeah, it's okay. You know what? That thing you did worked out, and it's okay to feel good about it for 5 minutes and then get back to work.
Yeah.
As long as you're willing to only berate yourself for 5 minutes when you do something dumb.
Yeah.
Because I did some of those too.
Hard. Okay, so I got a last question for you, and you can have a last question for me. Okay. We've got 3 minutes until the end, and I'm going to go meta on us, which is I'm going to have our ending discussion be about endings. This was titled "Our Revels Now Are Ended," which is a line from Shakespeare. And there's also a great line from Shakespeare that Bottom says about essentially this idea that the play hath no bottom. And so I titled the recent article I wrote, mentioned that idea. And when we threw this title out there, immediately said, no, wait, but these things don't end. And I wonder if you can tell me, do they end?
I know that the Rhizo 14 group just got accepted to Alt-C in September. So they're still cooking. And it's funny because they have a distinct understanding between the conversations they were having in Rhizo 14 and the conversations they're having in Rhizo 15 amongst the same people. So I think they will end eventually, probably as things morph and change and twist and move, and identity is never really identical. But I don't think if you manage to get your way to community, if you manage to get to the point where you're involved with a group of people who care about each other, I don't think that ever really ends. Now I'm going all crazy. I've lost the meta, and I'm all like heart pounding over here. But for me, if you can learn or play, whatever you're doing, with a bunch of people and really enjoy your time with them, that stuff has a permanent change on people.
Yeah.
And it's in those moments where I see it as being foundationally different for people. Where there are some people for whom Rhizo 14 or Rhizo 15 were changing points in the way that they looked at their careers. I mean, I don't mean that there was a cajillion people that were like that, but for some people it was. But and for a lot,
right? Yeah,
that's right. And for a lot of people, it was a way of finding a new bunch of people who were like them, and that doesn't end either, right? Even if you don't talk to those people all the time after a year, or I mean, last year after Rhizo 14, they got together and taught 6 more weeks. So it really didn't end in that way. I don't know if that's going to happen this time, but that understanding that the world, whether it's in Guyana or Egypt or Australia or Japan, is all full of people who are from all these different cultures who are just like you. That first realization of that for anybody, I think it's transitional.
Yeah, and I think you find people who are, it's not even just more, it's not that they're more like you necessarily, they are often more like you, but you also find people that you can engage with in a way that's fuller somehow. I mean, that's the glory of the internet for me, is that I've found people in other countries who I feel closer to than my next door neighbor. And that maybe that's something to be a little sad about. For me, it's also something to be really excited about, because there are people in the world. Like another line from Shakespeare, "Oh, brave new world," that has such people in it. I mean, essentially, like finding these people and connecting with them. People in this MOOC asked, well, why did you only do Shakespeare as a 4-week MOOC? Why didn't you do a 6-week or an 8-week or a 10-week MOOC?
Because it's exhausting.
Yeah, I don't think oh gosh, because every single week that I'm releasing new stuff, I'm spending 8 hours that morning just to get it ready. And I spent 9 months building it all. But no, actually, that's not the reason. I would do all of the work in the world for these people and all of the work in the world for this stuff that I do because I love doing it so much. I think the reason I keep it short is because it's not a thing. It's a red herring. The course is a red herring. It's a catalyst. It's just the start of something. It's like the first notes that you play of a song. And then you hear the rest of the song in your head. The course is that thing. The course is just those first few notes. The rest of the song is going to play in your head. And if it doesn't, it wasn't a good song, or it wasn't the right song, or, so in a sense, it's just let's use this as a sort of catalyst to get a conversation started, and then it will continue on its own.
Okay. I get the last question here, which is kind of fun.
Okay.
Is this something we should encourage other people to do? Is it possible for you to approach one of your colleagues and say, you know what, you should totally do a Erasmus MOOC? I don't know if Erasmus is the way to go, but I've had a lifelong 7-year dream of doing a Dylan MOOC, for instance. But is this something that we should encourage more people to do? Or is it something that is the MOOC that you're doing so tied to the way that you work and your understanding that it's not really replicable?
I don't think that my MOOC is replicable, and I don't think your MOOC is replicable. And I think that that's a mistake that we often make, to think that someone could listen to us talk for an hour and then replicate what we did. I mean, it's not even the fact that there's the two of us. There's also all the people that were in your MOOC. There's also R.L. Widman and Kathy DeRose and Sarah Marty, the main teachers of my MOOC, and then all of the guest teachers that I brought in. You're in my MOOC. Bonnie's in my MOOC. And the thing is, all of those things are essential to make it go. So you can't repeat it. You can't replicate it. I think what you can.
He's gotten excited again. This is what's happened. Every time he gets enthusiastic about something, his video drops out. I will say to what Jesse is saying here, that the people in Rhizo are unreplicable as well. Oh, there he is. Hi, Jesse.
I did that same thing where I got all. Did you see? I got all excited.
I did. That's what I told everybody while you were doing it. Yeah, and it's the same for me, because I look at people like Simon Ensor and his work, which is cripplingly good, and yet so difficult to understand on a daily basis, where every time you see his name come up and every time he tags me, I go, because I know it's going to take everything I've got to catch what's going on, right? And you could do this, if you did this course without a Simon or without a Kevin or without a Sarah, without a, and I don't want to start listing names because there's 100 people, Autumn this year, all kinds of people. It's not going to be the same. It really isn't. And I think, but would you, that's only answering half the questions. Would you encourage someone else to do it?
Yeah, yes, and I think I do on a daily basis. The reason why is that I would on a daily basis. No, maybe not quite daily. Like that's pretty. Yeah, that was overstatement. I've been known to have some overstatement. You said earlier. You said it's good for pedagogy. You said earlier that you did it for you. And I think that that's what I would encourage people to. I would encourage people to do it for them. Don't expect that you can save the world with a MOOC. Don't expect that you can say, that's not. I actually jokingly, and this became the tagline for our recent editor training for hybrid pedagogy. I was quoted, and I think I said it in a private conversation, but then someone from my staff, who shall go unnamed, decided to quote me. And I said, we're not saving the world, we're just saving education. And I both, part of me wants to poke at that and say, no, not really. We're really just trying stuff.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
another part of me wants to say that that's how we save education, is by just trying stuff, you know?
Absolutely. You know what? That's a perfect place to end that video. I'm going to stop the broadcast, everybody. Thanks for those of you who listened and anybody who watches this video after. If you have any questions, contact Jesse. He's way smarter than me.
No.